conversation is key. I would advise everybody to have constant communication with their line managers, feed in, come back with things that you've achieved, go back for new things that you want to achieve. It's a wrong notion that the job is the typical tutor, teaching, just limited to education role. The role is something that you can actually polish in a way that works for you as a radiographer.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Skilled Personnel Network podcast. My name is Fodi Kyriakos, and we have with us.
Hi, I'm Boz. I'm a reporting radiographer.
Brilliant, and welcome to our guest.
Hi, Boz, and hi, Fodi. I'm Noyal, and I'm an MRI practice educator. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
It's an absolute
Great
pleasure to have you. And Noyal, we first met at UKIO in June. Now, we must thank and we must plug the two people that brought us together, which was Cheryl Crewis from Breast Density Matters and Yvonne Thackeray from your Imaging Academy. And I genuinely do thank them for that, Noel, because I think from the moment I met you, sir, there was a genuine feeling straight away of the passion you've got for the profession. And we are absolutely delighted to have you on the podcast. So what I'd like to do, if it's possible, because I'm extremely excited about this interview, is maybe just go back right to the beginning before we start talking about what you're doing in the profession at the moment. Really like to get to know your origins, where you started from, and how you got into the profession.
Absolutely, Foddy. So, just to give you guys a bit of insight, I'll have to track back to the year 2010. So that's when I was at this first crossroads moment, because you've just finished schooling and you really don't know what you want to do. And I think I was one of those lads who was kind of lost in the wilderness there. I come from India, so it's an entirely different educational dynamic back home. So I did want to pursue my studies in medicine, but it's highly competitive back home. And like I said, the dynamics is really different. And the least I could do was at least try to join a paramedical profession. Uh, which turned out to be quite an advantage considering the fact that the syllabus and everything that we studied during the first few years would be the same. So I took a lot of pride in doing that course, and then we had the opportunity to decide what we wanted to do based on our grades and mark systems along the second year, and that's when radiography came out. So I was quick to just go and grab that golden fruit, because I've been told, and I always have been told, that radiography is something really special. And I also had this little thing for echocardiography, but I settled for radiography finally, considering it's a very diverse profession in itself, where you can, choose between modalities like CT, MRI, fluoroscopy, X-ray, nuclear med, and etc., etc. So that got me into the profession, and I finished my bachelor's degree in 2014. Once I'd done that, I realized that I wanted to do something further in terms of improving my educational status quo, and I was quick to go and do a master's degree as well. I did not specialize in anything particularly because I wanted to get into the depths of every modality. And I got just that when I did a master's at a university back home called Manipal University, where I did a master's. So I was exposed to all my modalities again, such as CT, MRI, a little bit of even ultrasound. Can you believe that? So all this has been very dear to me from that time onwards. After that, in the year 2016 again, my life took a big turn when I made my first entry into clinical applications. So I did have a lot of questions asked back at me. Why, Noel? Why do you want to you've just finished your studies. We understand you've done your master's and all that, but why do you want to go into applications right now? Do you think it's the right moment? So I was a bit of a person who liked challenges, to be honest. And I thought that as a big challenge at that time, especially because in India, you need to be a pro at what you do. And they are really going to test you. The customers are quite testing there, very daunting customers. And I thought I should go and do this because I also had a little bit of a business acumen in me at that time. and that led me into becoming an app specialist for 2 years with Siemens. And there was a bit of a career progression. I went over to work with Philips as well for 3 years, and then COVID happened, and that's when everything took a standstill. Businesses were not doing good. People were just sitting at home. Work from home came in, and I had numerable colleagues here in the UK. I can't even count how many, and they've always been saying UK, it's really different out there. You've got to come and explore it. Radiography is just booming here, especially in terms of it's a very neatly regulated profession, nothing like what we have back home, and the money's not bad. So I was having a look at some career prospects. COVID gave me all the time to do my research, get my HCPC and stuff done, and then I was on the next flight here with family. So that's a little gist of the last 10 years of my career, and currently at UCLH as an MRI practice educator.
Well, it's quite quite the it's a different journey in than most people do, which
Yeah.
is great. Just picking on one thing you mentioned at the end there, we've got quite a few colleagues who've come over from India and had their HCPC registration before they came over, just as you mentioned. However, we had a guest a few episodes ago who came over before the HCPC registration and had to do it here, which set him back a little bit. How is it very well known in India? Is it quite put into the syllabus or whatever it is that you need that HCPC registration before working here? How's it advertised to you?
So that's a very good question, boss, because but I must start by saying that there's absolutely no way of advertisement or anything like that. It was just by chance that I personally came across this, and I wouldn't have
Okay.
even known about the HCPC and all of that if it wasn't from my previous senior colleagues who made it here years back. So, but coming to the whole equation about HCPC and the educational system, I must say that if you undergo a proper degree in India, from a reputable institution, which I was lucky to have done my course from, for instance, then I don't think it should be a bit of a hurdle. It's quite a straight transition in terms of the way your registration just works perfectly, as long as you've submitted all documents that the HCPC has mentioned. And I come from that batch of radiographers where we used to be very meticulous regarding the whole registration process. So we used to even carry around a pretty big a doc of documents. I had a big file, I remember, about 60 pages and odd, and I had it peer reviewed by my professors, even for grammatical mistakes. I was very meticulous. I didn't even want them to send it back to me and say, Noel, you're missing something out, especially when it comes to getting your documents attested, getting it verified, statement of comparability. Everything just worked out fine because I had that trail, that little template that my seniors or my ex-colleagues had left behind that probably worked out well for me, and I just followed along their footsteps, and it was just perfect.
Oh, that's good. That's good. No, it just seems to be a hole in the advertising or marketing of the workplace of the UK trying to attract international recruits. They seem to miss out that quite critical part of saying, by the way, you need to be registered.
Hmm.
But that's it's good to know.
Yeah, I
Do
think
you know?
a few of like
Sorry.
sorry, Foddy, were you about to say
No, no,
something?
you carry on.
So I have known a few of my colleagues as well, like what Boss was previously saying. I mean, they got here without the registration, and they turned out just fine. Some of them were finding it a bit tough because they didn't really brace for the situation. So they were on a spouse visa, for example. So they probably had their partner or someone coming here to do a course, and then they were radiographers themselves, so they thought, all right, why not I come here and get registered? So it works a bit differently when you're back home because you've got access to the right resources. If you want
Yeah.
to get it attested, you've got all that legal backing, you've got people to support you, and things work out just more easily when you're back home. So once they come here, they normally find it a bit tough to get the registration done. I'm not really sure why that happens, but I think it's an all different dynamic if you commence your registration when you're back in India, back home.
Definitely. And just for the purpose of the podcast, Noel, it's probably, and more so for our UK listeners, just try and explain to us the sheer size of imaging in India, right? So one of the things that Boz alluded to is that we and I think you mentioned it also, we get a high volume of radiographers that would come from India and from the Philippines, and almost to the extent where you're wondering whether radiographers will be um, trained almost in order to create a network of radiographers to come to the UK. But even my eyes have been opened over the last year when I've been having discussions with organisations in India, just the sheer size of the country in terms of population, but also just what's happening out there. It's quite phenomenal. I'd just be intrigued to get your view and just to explain to people what diagnostic imaging or radiology in general looks like in India.
So I'll try to put it as in a nutshell as much as possible, for but I think that's a question that warrants at least 20 minutes of conversation. So radiology is divided into radiography and radiology very distinctly back home. So there's a very big distinction. And in fact, I don't think I might be even wrong if I say there's a little bit of discrimination in there. And the certain amount of dignity that's attached to different stratas of the job. So if you do a radiology course, then you are God Almighty. And radiography is often not looked upon as a profession that's, at par with something like what a radiologist does, for example. I think that is the root cause of all the problems here. And also, there's a dearth of jobs. So we've got, like you said, India is a burgeoning population. We've even overtaken China in that instance, and we don't have necessarily those jobs back home. And even if you did try to work as a radiographer, you're looking at working in a private clinic, for example, where they don't remunerate you well, or you don't have proper work conditions. So I think all of this boils down to the fact why Indian radiographers are looking for greener pastures in countries like the UK or Australia. So uh, I think there's a lot of changes happening at the moment. We also do not have a dedicated regulatory body for radiography along the likes of HCPC. I also think are lacking in terms of continuous professional development for Indian radiographers. There is stasis of information or knowledge. There's a lot happening out there, and I think that's exactly some of the reasons why our rads from back home are quite keen to come over to the UK. So they feel like there's more work-life balance. They're being appreciated. They're being paid at par at what their other companions or other colleagues from other AHP professions would make. People don't necessarily see them as something inferior. There's a certain level of respect attached to the role. There's passion in the role. People feel each other. There's a lot of continuous development and education, and career trajectories often look a lot better here in the UK. So I think these are some of the major differences between what we have back home and here.
Yeah, I mean, Boz, you mentioned when you're speaking to Noyal about the teams of people that you've worked with, the different types of teams. So often the biggest issue, guys, is not necessarily standards or that can exist, but actually how well someone is orientated and integrated when they arrive into a different country, because no matter where you go in the world, you're going to have different protocols, different, dare I say it, standards. It's not necessarily it doesn't necessarily define the quality of the radiographer, unless, of course, unless of course as you mentioned, Noel, the university degree may be substandard. But ultimately, everywhere's got different protocols and processes, right?
Yeah, I think it's one of the hurdles for the international recruits coming over is, so what happens now is the recruitment process that we use for international recruits is the international recruits come over, they get sent to a hub hospital or center and get kind of integrated with the NHS as a whole. And then after a week or so, they go to the hospital that's actually employing them. And unfortunately, even though they might all go to that one hub and get all the same education, we've had multiple kind of groups of international recruits, and each time we've had to change our induction procedures to, well, the first time we did it, it was completely, we didn't have an induction package for international recruits. We had an induction package for new radiographers, and we used that to the best of our ability. But as we were doing that, there were hurdles of basic things. How does banking work? How do I get where do I find apartments, things like that. So we had to add all that in, and every time we've been getting better and better. But we've also used our previous recruits to go in and speak to the new recruits and go, right, you need to know this, 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 and this. We found this hard. And we've used other people's experience in building that induction. And I think that is something that could be, I don't think it could ever be centralized. The whole NHS uses the same thing, but it was a very interesting process that's ongoing when we get new recruits. How did you find it, Noel? Was it fairly easy for you, or how was that induction into your first job here?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on this, boss, because yeah, now coming to your the first part of your question, I perfectly believe that pastoral support is quite quintessential for a new radiographer, especially when they come from a country like India. It could be for something as silly as where do I go get a pack of rice? Where do I get a big bottle of water or something like that? Or where do I get an Oyster card? So these were things that left me hanging for about a week before I deciphered where I could go and get these. And I was quite lucky because the first organization for whom I worked in the UK, they had a well-structured pastoral program, which wasn't it was quite generalized, but then it did the job. So they did have a document that was sent over to me, which had a list of websites that I need to refer if I wanted to rent a house, or what kind of documents I needed in advance, or uh, but notwithstanding all these good things, I still had difficulties getting my first house, if you know what I mean. Because they used to
Yeah,
ask me for a reference that nobody could give me. I didn't know
yeah,
anybody here. Where could I get a reference from? I didn't have a credit history, so I couldn't get a credit card. I couldn't get internet. So it took me a while to actually figure out these things. And I think little things do matter, and we should be coming up with, if not a holistic, at least a bit of a document that can give everyone here in the UK some footing during the first few weeks, or at least the first month.
Yeah. Noel and Boz, the points you raise here are still an issue, although we are becoming, I think, better now at looking at orientation and integration programs to pastoral care, that immediate point at which someone then comes to the UK. But it is actually one of the areas that I'm looking to create a support network for with the Skilled Personnel Network. So the platform for me, when it comes into its absolute own, will be a support mechanism for radiographers and all that, such as yourself, when you first come over, and how you develop your immediate support network and community, and not necessarily community by association back to a community of people from the same country, but genuinely people that may have gone through the whole process, which could include that. And one of the things that I'm majorly looking to try and create is that, and I liken it to Cypriots. You know, if you go somewhere and you start a new life, it's not necessarily that you need to find a Cypriot radiographer, in my instance, or someone working in healthcare, but just generally someone who culturally understands that they've gone through the same transition. So, and we may be able to try and support ways of creating additional networks there. So definitely, I think it's a very important point that does it needs continual support, and Noel, maybe you may be able to offer some of that support down the line as well.
Absolutely, Foddy, absolutely, because I'm more than happy to just give back based on what I've learned and from my experience here. And I should say that the initial few months they're quite depressing. If not, you're with your family or someone. If you're alone, it's so daunting to be in a new country wherein you walk outside your house when it's dark and you come in when it's still dark, and you have nowhere to go. There's nothing you can buy. Shops close quite early. There's no off license close to you. It's quite difficult. So, yeah, I couldn't agree further with you on this.
So we've we've gone down a little rabbit hole there, I think. Let's pull it back to you a little bit more, Noel. Um,
Absolutely.
right at the beginning, you said what was your title? Practice educator. So when I hear the words practice educator, in my initial, I now know more, but a lot of people will just think, oh, they're the clinical tutor at the hospital. They're the ones who deal with, stereotypically, practice educator is a fairly new role or fairly new title. It used they when someone hears clinical tutor or practice educator, they're the ones who deal with the students from the universities at the hospital and don't really. But I don't think that really scratches the surface of your actual role. So can you give us a bit more kind of what's your day to day?
Absolutely, boss. So I think you're not the only one who's asked me this question. So it is quite a niche, quite a new role, like you mentioned. And if I was to rewind back by 2 years, my first role was not a practice educator at the NHS. It was that of an advanced MRI radiographer. So I was a band 7 basically before I became the band 8. So it did give me a little bit of time to actually. Uh, if I don't know if that's the right choice of word, but then prove my metal and then
Yep.
actually prove that I was able to show or add more value to this role if there was ever a role like this. Not that I knew this was coming into picture, but then when it did come, I was quite quick to go and snatch this because this was something I really wanted. Now, going into the job duties and responsibilities, it's a wrong notion that the job is the typical tutor, teaching, uh, just limited to education role. The role is something that you can actually polish in a way that works for you as a radiographer. So it all makes a lot of sense after the new ECF framework that the SORs recently brought into the picture. So it gives you a sense of direction at the point where you've reached your band 7 or senior band 6 to understand if there's an opportunity for you, something to do more than just becoming a manager, for example, or or doing consultant work. Is there something in between? Is there something that I can do while combining the best of all worlds, while combining the 4 pillars of clinical practice? So I think that's exactly what I've tried to carve out of this job, and my managers and my seniors have been quite supportive with that aspect as to how I can polish this role further by touching on the 4 pillars of clinical practice. So what I currently do is a little bit of clinical work. I also am engaged in some research. I do leadership and management on a day-to-day basis, which is of course not first line managing or real line managing, but then rather providing new radiographers with mentorship, uh, taking care of preceptors, giving them that pastoral support. So all this is a little bit of what I do during my practice educator role. Now, if I was to look at it on a weekly basis, then I've made it a point to divide each day for doing a little bit of everything there, just so I don't veer or steer out of focus, but rather still touch on the four pillars of clinical practice. And I think that's certainly given me, as a practice educator, a sense of direction and something to hone my skills and work towards for the next couple of years.
That's
Uh,
great. Did you create this role, or was there a job that went out and then you've made it your own? Because it sounds like it's evolved somewhat.
Yeah, so when the role did start, nobody had much of an idea regarding what exactly the role should entail. So it was more like a chat GPT version of a job description with vague terminologies, but it's evolved over time. People have started adding more roles and responsibilities to the job, and I've been so lucky, especially the place where I work, that I've been entrusted with some additional jobs, for example, networking, getting in touch outside the Imaging Academy, promoting the goodwill of the Academy, collaboration, which doesn't necessarily happen when you work in a hospital, because as a radiographer, you possibly couldn't go and collaborate in a way that a practice educator does. So, another good example would be wherein I'm about to deliver a lecture in MRI safety. So, there's a lot out there that you can actually carve out for yourself than just restricting yourself to a conventional tutor teacher model. You can actually go
yeah.
out there and take roles and responsibilities that would make better sense of your profession. So yeah, it has certainly evolved over time.
I mean, just for the purposes of this call, because we had a practice educator on a couple of weeks ago, Emma, who was in radiotherapy now. Being that you're part of the Imaging Academy, how's your role disseminated around the region?
So along with the practice educator role, I know this practice educator role has been there uh, under the banner of nursing for quite some time, but for radiography, it's quite new. And then, at least for the London area, what they'd done is they had clustered us into different ICBs, and then North Central London, for which I work, was one of those ICBs. So I've got 7 trusts under me, UCLH including, where I currently work, and my work is disseminated across these 7 trusts. And I don't have a certain stipulated time where I need to go there or do things, but rather I tend to do my things virtually. And if they do have, let's say, a new starter, I've selected a base location where all of them are happy to come and get their trainings from. So I orchestrate all my trainings from my base location, which is currently UCLH, and then I extend my reach across to NCL, which has 7 trusts under the banner of NCL. So likewise, we've got other academies as well. So just like NCL, we've got NEL, we've got Southwest, and we've got different ICBs in the respective imaging academies, which are all doing similar work in their respective areas.
Yeah. Would you say the awareness of practice education in radiographies is well known? Did you know about the role before you fell into it, so to speak?
Honestly, no, 40. I had no idea about this role. I didn't even know this existed. Or else I would have been hoping to apply directly for a role such as this from India. Because being in applications myself, I was always an educationally orientated person. So, yeah, to answer to your question, I didn't have any idea about this role until I came here. And I was, like I said before, quick to just go and apply for this role the moment I saw it because it matched perfectly with my vision for what I had for myself in the next couple of years.
Amazing, amazing. What one thing I'll pick up on, and Boz, I'm sure you've got lots of questions, but one thing I'll pick up on before you come in, Boz, is that you use the term "I was very lucky," and I always say that's a very humble approach because over time I've realised people do make their own luck, and I think genuinely, probably whether you realised it or not, whatever you were doing as a senior Band 7 MRI radiographer was paving the way, and your love for education was paving the way for you to go into this role. Trust me, Noel, you'll find many occasions if you keep doing what you're doing that you make your own luck. So it might appear like luck, but it genuinely is as a result of the great work that you're doing.
I- I've,
And
I could ask questions all day about your role, because we do have imaging academies up here in Manchester, but the role of practice educator in your sense of the word doesn't seem. I haven't heard tell of it pretty much. It's still, no one really knows what the imaging academy is or means or does, which I think needs work. Um, you're you say you when you deal with new starters or things like that. So are you kind of the go-to hub for all the trusts underneath you? So it doesn't matter which hospital they're going to be working in, they all still come to you for initial whichever training you provide?
that's correct, boss. So that question that you asked me also has a little bit of the hidden challenge that entails this profession. So the main challenge of this profession initially was to get out there and make the stakeholders realize that such a post existed. So nobody was fully aware of this role until about, let's say, a year back. So I've been in post for 2 years and counting. And it took me a good amount of time to actually get out there and market myself. So you weren't wrong, boss, when you said that, is this role really doing what it's supposed to? Do the people know about this? So quick answer was no to the first bit of it. No one knew about it, and they were like, who's this chap? Where did he come out of? What's this academy? Why do I need to send my trainee? So it took us a good amount of time to really put our work out there, create training packages, market ourselves, do a couple of road shows, if you may call it that way, go out there, push ourselves, show them the good work we're doing, give them trial sessions. I even had to go and travel to certain sites and do my trainings at their place at a time that works for them. So it was a lot of hard work initially getting out there, proving our worth as an academy, and also people and stakeholders look at value. How much time can I save by sending someone out to Noyal? What's different from my competency package that I've had here for time immemorial? How different is his package? So we had to show as an academy how we could bring about an impact. For example, reduction of training time, or
Mm.
getting the radiographers to stay with them for a year longer. I don't know if that's the reason we're still, checking on that bit about attrition, but the idea is also to support and empower radiographers from the academy so that they think they are being, so that they feel that they are being nurtured in terms of CPD, and giving them a sense of focus. So it was a bit of a challenge, but still, I think we're in the process of getting out there, making it more palatable for superintendents and other key stakeholders, and getting them to see the actual value.
That's I think the way you're doing it is, so you speak of stakeholders and they just want figures, they want stats, they want which is fair enough. That's how they have to run. But I think front line, I think patients will be benefiting from this. If you've got a standard across a wide area of London, and you know that every radiographer in those 7 hospitals, 7, 8 trusts, whatever it is you mentioned, are all at the same standard, that
Yeah,
gives patients a confidence that oh, I'm not near my home hospital, which I'm comfortable with. I've broken my leg. I don't mind going to that hospital because I know the standard is the same as what I would expect at my home hospital. And I think that's unfortunately undervalued sometimes by stakeholders who just want to know numbers. That sometimes the patients themselves and their, because I've spent a lot of time myself and with my children in hospital and different hospitals receiving different care, and you do create ideas about different hospitals, kind of going, I don't know, I'm not so confident going there, I'd rather go there. But if you're creating a standard of care and practice that people can be confident in, I think that makes such a difference. And it
yeah,
also, with the NHS kind of consolidating a lot of trusts and taking specialties away from things like that and spreading it around, people could get worried that oh, they've moved this service from this hospital to this hospital, is it going to be as good? But with things like academies which cover many trusts, I think that could be used for patient confidence, and I think that needs to be shown up a little bit more.
Yeah.
Absolutely, boss. I think you've hit the nail on the head when you said patient safety and patient care, because that's exactly one of our key focuses as well. And just to enumerate with a small example, it's the work we do at the CDCs currently. So we've got an extensive number of trainings that we've rolled out to the CDCs to help them cope with adverse scenarios such as anaphylaxis, for example, and how well they are equipped in terms of dealing with these scenarios by means of the simulation trainings that we deliver. So these are just reflections of how
Yeah.
we want to, voice out the concerns of the patient. Am I really in good hands? Do I go to a CDC, and what happens if I've got anaphylaxis, or is there someone there with that requires skill set and with that confidence to save my life? So I think all this translates as a big voice towards patient safety, and I think practice educator role is just about being a big advocate for that patient safety.
Do, do you think, Noel, that I mean, obviously, it's not a name and shame method, but if you're looking after 7 trusts, clearly some will be more. All will probably want support and help, but some may be better at it than others. How do you find the um, budget aspect? So I had a statistic that was thrown at me. Anyone's more than welcome to rubbish this, but I've heard it enough times that roughly about £300 a year is associated to CPD per radiographer. So £300 per radiographer in a trust. So does that translate to how you budget what you do? Are you involved in that area? I'm just quite intrigued because depending on where you go in the country and from trust to trust, some are better that they're at accessing that CPD budget than others.
Um, so to start with the first bit of your question, for you, I think currently our trainings are not for monetary returns. We do it on a free basis. So amongst our trusts, the 7 trusts can avail this training from our academy, for example, free of cost. All they have to do is just send them over during a Tuesday or a Thursday to the base location, and then they get this training. So we haven't still figured out a business model as to how best we can make this more sustainable for the future. I think I quite understand what you're trying to say, but we
Mm,
haven't really monetized that bit yet. And the second bit is yes, there is an AHP funding that's available to everybody across the NHS. I think it's £1,000 funding for 3 years. So well said, £300 a year approximately, like what you said. So anybody and any AHP can basically avail this by means of sending out an expression of interest. A few trusts, they just disperse those funds immediately. Some of them want justification as to how exactly you're going to utilize this and what benefit they're going to get and so on. But yeah, there are lots of funding, but I still feel there needs to be more funding or probably more emphasis on trainings that will not be fitting into that little budget. So £1,000, I still feel is a bit not up to scale in terms of what you can buy. The buying power is still quite less. So if you go for an MRI safety course, for example, a good safety course can cost you 700 quid. So it's not much of a funding that we have there, but we've got to put up with it. And I hope there's some change for the future.
well, I mean, what you're doing at the academies, by the way, is I think some incredible work. And I think even though it's free necessarily, well, it's free as you say to the sites when you're providing it, you're getting the funding from somewhere. And is that from NHS England?
That's right. Yeah. So we are funded by NHS England.
Yeah. Well, I'm very much an advocate of industry partnerships, and I think that therein lies one of the opportunities I think to increase funding, to work. I think for industry to work even closer than they do already to support workforce. And workforce isn't just recruitment. Workforce is retention. Workforce is all of the work that you're doing, Noyal, with learning and development. So I think there's a wider discussion, certainly, to expand on that.
Absolutely. I think a well-empowered radiographer is more likely to stay than a radiographer who feels undervalued and who's not given CPD. So I think education is one of those key foundations that every employer needs to focus on, and it's about time we fix that, fix that gap there.
Yeah, it's not just being given the opportunities for CPD, I think. When you come out of your bachelor's degree or first come into the thing, the last thing you want to be doing is more studying. A lot of people. Some people just want to carry on studying. And CPD, the vast majority in my experience of people who go, oh, you've just experienced X scenario, why don't you go and write it down, do some CPD? And they kind of go, yeah. They don't want to do CPD. I think we need, what also needs to change, and I think, Noyal, I think from what you're doing, I think they're sending you staff, but then you're showing them CPD isn't, we're not going to sit and you have to write reams of reflections which send shudders down people's spines. It's CPD isn't necessarily doing a piece of academic work. It's experiencing and integrating experiences into your practice.
Correct.
And I think that is a good thing, that if your academy is able to kind of go, here's a training package we've got, let's push it out to everybody, rather than getting an email going, oh, there's a training course over there, deal with it yourself if you want to go. And it's kind of a mindset that CPD isn't work. It's helping you be better at your career and opening doors to you. And I think that's what you're from the sound of it, that Imaging Academy is enabling that message to go across.
Absolutely. I think
Yeah.
that's exactly what we're trying to do. So we want CPD to be fun. We don't want to send shudders down people's spines, like what you rightly said, boss. It's not about writing paragraphs and paragraphs. It could be anything. It could be a simple conversation you had with a junior colleague and you've given them something, some kind of scaffolding, for example, or, as long as you've done something that contributes ultimately towards a better patient care, better patient safety, something that translates into a better patient outcome, should be counted as CPD. And my only advice, probably to anybody watching this, would be to record those CPDs just so you have a trail of what exactly you've done. And in case, as you rightly know, if someone tends to come back and audit you, you've always got something substantial to show. So it's good practice for us to keep track of what exactly we're doing, at least in the form of a one-liner. It could be on a book, or if you wanted to be more sophisticated, you could use something like the society's template that's readily available.
Yeah, the CPD now. It's been
That's
updated
what.
fairly recently, which is and it has improved, because it was fairly hard to navigate when it first was available, but now it is a lot better. So your role, as you've mentioned, kind of evolved. No, I don't think. Did they know? Did the academy know what they wanted from you? Probably not. Did you know what you wanted it? So when you apply for a job such as yourself that you know you can do, but job descriptions in the NHS are, for want of another word, very robotic. They don't encompass your day-to-day, your role. You have to be able to do this, you have to be skilled in this, you have to have this accreditation. How does it look to you building on that to making your day-to-day? You've got skills and ideas that are slightly outside those set job descriptors. How did you go about saying, actually, I think I should be doing that type of thing? How did that look for you?
Yeah, so I think a good starting point would be during your appraisals, for example, and also if you can set yourself some good, smart objectives in conjunction with what your manager wants you to do. And then you could always take it one step at a time and see how best you can contribute towards doing something different from what the job description asks you to do. So if you do have something good to offer in terms of better patient care, satisfaction, overall stuff, you know, collaboration, multidisciplinary interaction. I think you need to take it one step at a time. Try to talk to your manager. Try to get that extra bit of support because you need that support, supportive higher ups down there to be able to bring out the best in you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always have to be just something written down on paper, but rather, if you want to get into something different, it could be like doing audits, uh, it could be service improvement plans, trying to get involved in, let's say, the interview process. It could be simple things, but I think it's about having a good communication with your higher ups and then having it all charted down and following a well structured way. And bear in mind, you don't want to be overcrowding yourself with lots of duties and responsibilities because you want to be doing things only what you can, bearing in mind you've got time constraints. So, probably two or
Yeah.
three things to start with, just get the ball rolling, and then it just snowballs itself and keeps up the momentum. So, conversation is key. I would advise everybody to have constant communication with their line managers, feed in, come back with things that you've achieved, go back for new things that you want to achieve. And I think that's the best way forward.
Definitely.
I think we could talk to you all day, Noel.
Yeah, I agree. I
It's
agree.
Cheers, Boris.
it's just great hearing someone who's got such enthusiasm for their role, and I can imagine that just comes across to your trainees and the people you're dealing with. Um, I think I can't really put it into thing. Did you see this for yourself? Did you when you kind of went into finished your masters and came over here? Did you picture an educational role for yourself, or were you kind of open to specializing, or was that your goal?
Education, as like I always said, Bros, it's been always dear to me. And in fact, after coming here to the UK, I've embraced it all the more because there's a lot of value that the radiography community here gives to education and continuous development. So I think I've embraced it all the more. Probably the only extra bit that I would have had to my goals and ambitions would probably be entrepreneurial in some way in the future, and that too based on education. So it's a huge market out there, and it's also quite useful for the community. And you get that mental satisfaction that you've improved someone's lives, and ultimately you've promoted patient safety care, and you've helped someone get there. So it's a lot of mental satisfaction at the back of what we do, and I think that's exactly why I've embraced this, and I will continue to embrace education. I don't see myself doing anything else than education and training, because education is one of the toughest jobs. I can, if I were to go back, to my kindergarten days or back to school, that was probably the toughest job, being a teacher. And we've coming from there,
Yeah.
we've learned a lot. We've seen these folks, and it's not bad to put into practice those little things that you've learned down there. Uh, and yeah, I think that is what I intend to do, and I always will. Probably, if I were to change a bit, I would add a bit of entrepreneurial touch to it. See best how I can take my learnings out there and then contribute in a better way.
I think that's the amazing thing, right? So just like you perhaps didn't know you'd be doing what you're doing now in 5 years' time, if one of the best things you can put into your students, at whichever level they are, is actually that unknown. And radiography in the UK offers that opportunity. You know, whether you stay in clinical practice and follow a path similar to yours, Noel, whether you go into fully into academia, if you go into industry, research, you've got so many different opportunities. So the one thing you could put into your team, your students from a very early point is no one know, you are the masters of your destiny. And if you're stuck somewhere, you have to sometimes look at yourself more as much as you do your environment, because you've got decisions you can make. And yes, everyone's got different uh, personal circumstances that may dictate different challenges, and for me, I mean, a perfect segue to ask you this question, Noel, based upon that is, what does the pinnacle of your, if you're looking now, and let's just say, using that notion, we don't know what the next 5 to 10 years hold like, but as you're looking at it now, what does the pinnacle look like for you?
I think it's certainly looking scalable for me, at least in the next 10 years. And I've carefully carved out my career trajectory, and I'm quite cautious not to go all the way to the pinnacle and then, just fall down, but rather take it in a very sustained way. So it's looking really bright, at least for me. Like I said, a little bit of training, a little bit of entrepreneurship, a little back of giving back to the society, what gave back to me a lot, patient care, try to see if I can collaborate with other like-minded individuals. So I think, Forty, you're the perfect example of collaboration, by the way, something like what you are doing from skilled personnel, building those
Thank you.
connections, making radiographers feel valued, coming up with a community, and keeping everybody stitched in a closed network, and then ultimately working towards patient safety and patient improvement. So I think that's pretty much what I have in store as well for the next 10 years as a radiographer. I might look at doing a few CPD courses myself because, as you know, in the education field, it's quite easy for you to fall down the ladder when you're training people. So you also need to be empowering yourself, doing that extra bit for yourself. It's so easy for you to forget yourself while you're educating others. So I think I also am keen to be doing a few courses myself, see how best I can upskill myself, and let's see what 10 years time we probably do another podcast to discuss what has happened in the
I'm
meantime.
hoping we'll do it a lot more before then, but I think so.
God, no one's going to be still want to be listening to our voices in 10 years' time.
Yeah,
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 I'll just get ready
rightly
to
said.
a walking stick and that. But yeah, actually, Noel, from that perspective, just before I sign off with my last question, and Buzz, I'm sure you might. Is there anything you're working on an MRI safety course that's still happening, right? So is there anything you want to tell us about some of the things you're doing on that front, and anything you want to tell the listeners?
So, like you rightly said, Forty, I'm working on something in-house for our radiographers. It's not yet signed off, or I don't know if it's the right time for me to be sharing, but certainly the intention is to take it across to all the radiographers. So what we want to break here is the silo, which has been a lot prevalent in the radiography industry, at least in London, outside London. It's just everywhere. So I think we need to come together as one strong community and be in this together. So I think the idea is to get that training out there as soon as possible, provided it's gone through compliance and other pathways. But yeah, it is certainly boiling and it is maturing. So not just the MRI safety, couple of other training courses as well, multidisciplinary for radiographers from any modality, CT, MRI, a lot about leadership, common mistakes we encounter, or it can be conflict resolution, it could be human factors. I think all these trainings also should be weighed equally to what we do in terms of technical training. So it's not always about MRI doing scans and safety, but also the
Yeah,
soft skills. How do you interact with patients? How do you put into practice patient-centered care at its best? Or is there artificial intelligence coming? Is there something you want to do with that? And as inevitable as it is, we need to embrace artificial intelligence. So these are few things that we're working on, and we're just trying to make it as palatable as possible for all sections of our community. So we're exploring adult learning techniques to see best how best we can help adult learners, and we're experimenting different kinds of andragogies, sticking to certain pilots. So there's a lot out there. It's not just the MRI safety course. So please stay tuned to the imaging academies, and we can talk further about our different trainings that we are cooking for you.
Guild Personnel
Amazing.
Podcast, supplying the exclusives. Uh, that, this is just a kind of a generalized question. I'm going to sign. I'll leave it at this one, I think. I knew fairly early on that I wanted to go down the reporting pathway, which has now opened doors. I've done some guest lecturing. I've done a podcast, which I would never have thought I would have been doing down the line. I do a lot of teaching with the students and things like that. Though a lot of my colleagues come in not knowing, not having a plan. Are you in favour of having? You talk about your 10-year. Are you in favour of giving yourself a rigid pathway, or a rough at least pathway that you want to succeed, or are you kind of a more spontaneous and see what fits? What if every radiographer had to do one or the other, which way would you think you'd lean?
So, I personally have been a bit of a conventional person, boss and 40. Like what I said, I've got this perfect career trajectory that I've got in my mind that I've envisioned over the years. But I wouldn't mind with a certain degree of randomness. It's good to be spontaneous once in a while. So, I've also realized from my colleagues, my very good colleagues who've taught me this. So it's good to have your fingers in a couple of pies. Doesn't hurt, just so you never know what the future holds in store for you. So, as a radiographer, let's take the example of artificial intelligence, for example. As much as a big threat that it looks like it's looming all over us, I think there's a lot of opportunity in there. And I think as radiographers, we need to be prepared to take this on head first. So, it's not bad for you to have that little amount of spontaneousness or a little bit of randomness in your career. But if you personally ask me, I would say envision what's going to happen in the next couple of years and take it one step at a time. It's a common mistake that novice radiographers do. I met a person yesterday who asked me exactly the same question of what you did, boss. He was like, "I've got three ideas, Noyal. I want to be a practice educator, I want to be a superintendent, and I want to be a reporting radiographer." So I was like, I was a bit confused myself. All right, that's a lot of things you want to do, which is great, but have you really made up your mind? What would you be seeing yourself as in the next 10 or 15 years? You obviously can't be doing all three unless you're some superhuman Einstein prodigy from 2030, but otherwise, I think I conveyed my point. So it's about what you want to see yourself as in the next 10, 15 years. And is that really coinciding with your values, your interests, your strengths, and something that's going to keep you motivated at that time? What you don't want to do is plateau yourself out. So in 10 years' time, you want to just get to that pinnacle, but not plateau yourself out yet. So it's a good thing to also compare it with you go into the gym. So you don't want to be doing the same thing every day, but rather a combination of different things that keep you motivated and active. So yeah, I think it's a hybrid model that certainly works here. Perfect career trajectory with each rung that you can make and consolidate as you go up, and also a little bit of randomness and spontaneousness. Yeah, I think that's the way it should be forward, and just go and see what life has in store for you.
It's right and fitting that the final word should come from you, Noel. And any further things you'd like to add? How can people find you? And it sounds like you're about to tell us about your oops, as my ear drops out, your podcast as well. But what I was going to say to you is there anything else you want to add? This has been an amazing conversation. As Boz said, we could do this for hours.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Fori. I think that was an amazing opportunity that you just gave me, and I got to thank all of you guys for the support. I can see Nick, the producer, Bro, Boss, Fori, all those emails, all those things that we did to and fro. So thanks for giving me the opportunity. And I think if anybody wants to reach out to me, they can always reach me via LinkedIn. I'm quite active there. So you can search up Noyal Matthew, MRI Rad, and you should find me. I've also got an MRI group that I personally I'm the admin for via WhatsApp. So there's a lot of educational stuff that I disseminate there. The idea is to get it across to the whole of UK. We've just had some humble starts. We just want to get it out there. It's not business orientated or anything. It's just to help the radiography community, especially MRI ones, to feel better empowered. And most recently, we've also started a new special interest group in conjunction with the society. So for all my Indian colleagues, radiographers from India, if you want to join, please feel free to join. PAIR, it's called PAIR. It stands for the Professional Alliance of Indian Radiographers. So we're doing our best to help everybody out there because we know and feel what you've been through. And that's it. I think that's all I wanted to say.
Well, and the other thing, for those that are listening on radio, I'm pointing to the Skilled Personnel Network because Noel's on there as
I
well,
don't have skill at the
and
back.
jokes aside, genuinely, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on here, Noel. Anything we can do as Boz and I to help you with your career journey, you only need to ask. I think you've got no problems with your career journey, mate. You're going to be amazing. You already are amazing, and it's been an absolute genuine pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, it really has. I
Thank you.
think I'm going to walk away from this wanting to be a practice educator now.
There you see, your
Thank
CrossRoADS
you
You
is there
very,
will
as
be,
very
well.
much,
boss.
Noel,
Just
for
let
your
me know.
time. Yeah,
Likewise,
I,
Bars and Fadi. Thank you.